Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Residents of Yellowknife and 2 neighboring First Nations communities ordered to evacuate as wildfire encroaches upon them. Plus, Canada's Vimy Ridge War Memorial vandalized in France. We have reaction from a Canadian military vet. And after losing our CEO suddenly last fall, we introduce you to Miracle Channel's new leader.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. Thousands of Yellowknife residents have joined road convoys and long, snaking lines at the airport to flee a looming wildfire approaching the capital of the Northwest Territories. The 20,000 residents of the city and 2 nearby First Nations have been ordered to be out by noon tomorrow while crews battle some of the more than 200 blazes. Evacuations have forced thousands more to retreat to evacuation centers throughout Alberta as far south as Calgary. The city's Director of Emergency Management and Community Safety, Ian Bushell, says there's space for at least 5,000 evacuees, but the city will accommodate more if needed. And evacuees arriving safely in Alberta after fleeing the wildfires in the Northwest Territories are recounting harrowing tales of driving through flame-covered highways. One evacuee described the community of Enterprise as, quote, gone pretty much, saying signs couldn't even be read because they were melted.
The town was gone pretty much. There was no buildings left. It was just metal frames melted. There were signs. You couldn't even read the signs because they were, when the fire blew through there, they were all melted. Everything was gone. It was like devastation. Trees were like ashes. Everything was like ashes and on fire.
The only way we could drive is I seen the white line there. I said, look, I'm going to guide you with the white line. So I said, if I say white line, you come towards me. If I say I can't see you, you're going too far that other way. So that's how we got out of there, just watching the white line and saying, you're doing good. Go to the white line. You go back. I hope I never have to go through this in my life again. I'll have all white hairs.
The highways in and out of the Northwest Territories and northern Alberta are often used as escape routes from disasters such as these wildfires. So what happens if the roads get backed up or blocked off? Alberta's Transportation and Economic Corridors Minister Devin Dreeshen says the province has plans to build more roads.
Earlier this spring, when Alberta was faced with a very severe wildfire season, actually the worst on record, we looked at these issues because with the remote communities, especially in northern communities, they really just have, in a lot of cases, one point of safety, one point of access to get out. So looking at building in more safety egress or more additional roads for them to be able to travel on is a priority, and that's why we actually started the work on Highway 686, which essentially would connect Fort McMurray all the way across to Peerless Lake and essentially off to Grand Prairie, giving folks in Fort McMurray a secondary access point out of Fort Mac, not just Highway 63, as well as all the communities across northern Alberta to be able to have another point of safety to be able to escape in the event of wildfires.
The wildfires are causing a number of air quality problems, and Environment Canada has issued special air quality statements for many regions in Alberta, including here in Lethbridge. Angela Stewart is in with a quick update. Angela, not only is southern Alberta under a heat warning today, but we're also dealing with the air quality index.
Yeah, Jeanette, so because of wildfires burning in BC, that's having an effect on us, causing for poor air quality and reduced visibility. On top of that, there's also a heat warning, so if you are spending lots of time outside, it can make for some pretty brutal conditions. Having said that, 37 degrees was our high today, expected to dip down to a low of 16. Tomorrow, back up into those 30s, but rain is also in the forecast, so that'll help to cool things off. 31 tomorrow, dipping down to a low of 9. As for how the rest of the week is shaping up, I'll have all those details coming up later on in the show.
Thanks for that, Angela. Authorities in Maui are defending their decision to not use sirens the day wildfires broke out across the island. At least 111 people have been confirmed dead, with many more missing. The fires are believed to have been caused by some downed power lines. The blaze spread roughly 1 mile per minute due to strong winds from a passing hurricane. Herman Andaya with Maui Emergency Management explains why the island's sirens were not sounded.
Do you regret not sounding the sirens?
I do not. Had we sounded the siren that night, we're afraid that people would have gone Malka. And if that was the case, then they would have gone into the fire. And so that is the reason why our protocol has been to use WEA and EAS. By the way, I should also note that there are no sirens, Malka, or on the mountainside.
The Vimy Memorial in France has been vandalized, and many people are understandably very upset at the news as it was learned on Tuesday evening that a person was spraying graffiti on the special memorial that honors veterans. A Facebook user named Dave McCleary provided a photo after the mess was cleaned off, and he says the graffiti was sprayed close to his family name. His grandfather was severely wounded during Vimy and died a few days later as they tried to transport him to England. The monument bears the names of thousands of Canadian soldiers who died in the First World War. Glenn Miller, a volunteer with the Lethbridge Military Museum and a veteran himself, says he's deeply troubled by the vandalism.
As anyone who gets something vandalized through graffiti, it's quite upsetting. And I'm sure that the French and Canadian authorities are working closely and quickly together to honor the monument by having it removed as quickly as possible. When you're doing graffiti on a monument, it's a cenotaph. It's an empty tomb where all those 11,000 plus names are inscribed. So the graffiti extends to an insult to each and every one of them, plus the Canadians and country as a whole.
Veterans Affairs Minister Jeanette Pepita-Taylor released a statement saying, quote, I am shocked and appalled that the Canadian National Vimy Memorial, a sacred space honoring the 60,000 Canadians who gave their lives in Europe during the First World War, was vandalized. We are working with French authorities to find the person responsible. A survey of more than 1,000 Canadian pediatricians finds an alarming number of kids aged 12 and over have been treated for drug overdoses. The report says drug overdoses are a public health emergency, with fatal overdoses the leading cause of death in children and teens between 10 and 18 years old in BC. BC Children's Hospital pediatrician Dr. Matthew Caruana says the survey didn't even include kids and teens who may have overdosed but did not seek pediatric care. After touring an energy production facility in Peace County, Alberta this week, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland responded to questions from reporters about the directive reportedly given to cabinet ministers to trim federal spending by $15 billion.
The $15 billion of refocused spending is about precisely that. It's about ensuring that we as a government can support the most vulnerable among us, can invest in jobs and economic growth, and can do it while remaining fiscally responsible and maintaining Canada's AAA rating. So I am absolutely confident that those savings can be found. And I'm also confident that they are essential because we need to continue to be able to deliver what Canadians expect from us. And we do need to do it in a fiscally responsible way.
An August report by rentals.ca has released new information about the state of the rental market in Lethbridge. Our city came in at number 32 out of 35 for the most expensive areas to rent. Meanwhile, at the University of Lethbridge and Lethbridge College, there's a wait list for students who are looking to get into on-campus housing for the upcoming year. According to staff from the U of L Students' Union, they are struggling, and BCN's Micah Quinn has that story.
Students are having it to choose between their rental cost or buying groceries, and that's not a good problem to have.
Malika Thomas, the president of the U of L Students' Union, says many students are not able to afford rent in Lethbridge.
I remember getting emails about students living in a tent, and that's not a good problem we're seeing here within the city, and we're hoping that we're able to figure that out, some sort of governmental or institutional intervention, so students are not having to face that problem when the fall comes around.
The August report from rentals.ca says a one-bedroom unit costs $1,168 a month to rent, and a two-bedroom will net you a $1,375 price tag. Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, told us he's not surprised by Lethbridge's ranking on the report.
Although we have seen increases, one bedroom in Lethbridge, for example, in August of this year versus last year was up 6%, and a two bedroom this year versus last year was up 9%. that's actually the smallest amount of price increases also compared to all of those other markets.
Laura Correll, the Associate Director of Housing Services with the U of L, says the post-secondary is seeing an increase in demand over the past few years as the university is back to in-person classes.
Right now we don't have rooms available for any continuing students. So that's what the wait list is for. Anyone who's new high school, we do only have exactly 17 units available still, and that number will definitely go down as the rest of the month goes on.
According to Nancy Russell, the Dean of Student Affairs with Lethbridge College, residences in the college are close to capacity, and the post-secondary has started a waitlist as there is an especially high demand for family housing. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Over in Calgary, Mount Royal University State and the University of Calgary all have waitlists for on-campus housing for students. Calgary recently issued a water restriction on its residents due to drought conditions and low water levels in its rivers, and now the city of Lethbridge is following suit. City officials are asking residents to conserve water because of the hot, dry conditions. With the lack of precipitation, this has caused drought conditions for the city and surrounding areas. So as a proactive measure, voluntary measures have been put in place to help with the situation. Matt Harker, Water and Wastewater Engineering with the city of Lethbridge, says the city relies on the water from the Old Man River, and as of late, water levels have been decreasing.
We've been looking at those water levels. They're decreasing and not really going back up without any rain. So that was one of the largest measures. That being said, there's lots of factors that play into that, with weather and temperature and even wind with evaporation, things like that. So those are the kind of things we've been looking at to really get us kick-started on doing things like this.
Ways people can cut down on their water use includes limiting shower time and bath levels, flushing toilets only when necessary, and cutting down on watering lawns and washing cars. We're now into the third month of the city's encampment strategy, and officials say the latest stats show since June 19th that there's been 384 calls made to the city relating the encampment issues, including needle debris, biohazardous debris, and encampments. Of the 384 calls, 105 were made specifically about encampments around the city. Matthew Pitcher, Housing Solutions Coordinator with the City of Lethbridge, says a big change compared to last is there's been a significant decrease in the number of entrenched encampments.
I think what we saw last year is a prime example of that. So I think last year, primarily at the Civic Center out behind City Hall here, we saw encampments that had multiple structures, multiple people, and with that co-location and general entrenchment, there's often greater risk factors. They stay in one place longer, they accumulate more debris, those types of things. What we're seeing now is much more mobile, like I mentioned before, so fewer items, fewer people, which ultimately leads to fewer predatory instances, those types of things.
A member with the Lethbridge Police Service says they've been seeing a lot more compliance from individuals when it comes to entrenched encampments.
We do see a few that pop up overnight, and then they will take them down first thing in the morning when the sun's coming up, even before we'll receive calls for service about them. And that's been a growing trend. With that less entrenchment, those are your people who are truly trying to just live in a safe manner. More of our entrenched encampments do include a lot more violence, drug use, weapons. So we're seeing less of that, less violence, less weapons.
The city's full encampment strategy and response process can be found on their website. As you may know, Bridge City News is part of Miracle Channel, and last fall we sadly lost the man at the top of our organization. Leon Fontaine passed away suddenly in November, and since then, Miracle Channel Board of Directors has undergone the very difficult task of finding the next person who could take over the work Leon had started. Well, this week the board announced the next person to carry the torch, and he may be a familiar face to some of you. He's appeared on Return to Reason, one of Miracle Channel's programming, and he's also a pastor and a son-in-law of the late, great Leon Fontaine. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our new CEO, Jeremy Prest, who joins me now from Calgary. Jeremy, welcome, and first off, congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and I'm just so excited to be on this team and to be a part of Bridge City News and the Miracle Channel and what's in front of us. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you feel that you have some pretty big shoes to fill, Leon, with such a presence?
Absolutely. Leon Fontaine, for those of you who don't know, he was also my father-in-law. He was my boss. He was my pastor. He was, I think, as you say, big shoes, he was a force is kind of the word I tend to use. He was a man of authority, power, but also he just was probably one of the most disciplined, most diligent men I've ever met. He was known for reading a book a day, and that's not an exaggeration. He was a power reader. He was a man that valued knowledge and wisdom and insight. And so, yes, the shoes are very, very big, but I'm so honored to be able to learn from him over the last almost 2 decades.
Yeah, for sure. And because he was pretty much your mentor, I was going to ask you, what did you think has prepared you to take on this role?
Yeah, he absolutely has. Like, I'm a man of faith. I obviously, my walk with God is a huge part of my learning and identity, but when it comes down to the practical skills that are needed for this role, he was my absolute mentor. It almost felt like a master class anytime I was there in a meeting that he was dealing with lawyers and situations as we're walking through how to handle the non-for-profit here or the non-for-profit there. In seasons as we just walked through, we went through COVID. And as you can imagine, there's incredible trials that comes with that when a lot of the time non-for-profits finances are donor-based, right? And so in a season of time when the economy is so uncertain and people's very jobs are at risk, you can imagine non-for-profits are also at complete risk. And so to watch him walk that out with wisdom and grace was a masterclass. And I was able to do that, not only just that, but I just mean over the last 2 decades, watch him walk out every day, wisdom day in and day out, and just continually glean from anything that he could teach me.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so Jeremy, now that you're kind of carrying the torch, where do you see things going now in the future for Miracle Channel, for Bridge City News, for all the programming, really?
You know, the future is incredibly bright. We're in this window of time in our nation where truth seems to be relative, and it shouldn't be. Truth should be the truth. And so we're seeing and noticing that things are being interpreted one way and being only shown one way. And when David and I went down to the Freedom Convoy, I'm not sure if you as viewers were able to watch David and I down there for Bridge City News. It was one of the most eye-opening experiences I've ever seen, because I would witness something down there, and then all of a sudden I'd go and turn on the mainstream media news and see a fully different representation. It was quite eerie, if I'm being brutally honest. I would see this and go, what? And just realize the power of the news has when they can only portray what they want to portray. It should be that they're portraying only the truth. And you know, with Miracle Channel and Bridge City News, we are going to portray the truth. We are going to pursue the stories. I am so excited for the future of what Bridge City News is going to become. The fact that we're going to eventually get to a place of national news where we can influence this nation and help people get to a place where when they think news, they think Bridge City News. They think national news. They think of a trusted, reliable source, just as it already is, but on a much larger, much broader scale where we can continue to impact this nation and just show people the truth day in and day out.
Jeremy, thanks so much for taking the time to have us introduce you to our viewers. We do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeanette. I appreciate your time and what we're going to do here at Bridge City News.
That was Jeremy Prest, Miracle Channel's new Chief Executive Officer, joining us from Calgary. Well, it was a very hot, dry, and somewhat smoky day in our city today. In fact, Lethbridge was the hot spot in the province this afternoon, reaching 37 degrees. Was it a record breaker, though? We'll tell you after the break. Welcome back. We saw smoky and hazy conditions in Lethbridge today and also reached a high of 37 degrees. Angela Stewart is in now with a full look at weather. Angela, I saw that Lethbridge was the hot spot in Alberta this afternoon. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but did we break a heat record?
Yeah, Jeanette, we did actually break a record. Our high was 37 degrees today, so that beat the record of 36 that was set back in 2001. So very, very warm outside, very humid. And with the heat warning that we are currently under, it makes for brutal conditions if you are spending lots of time outside, so keep that in mind. However, tomorrow, going to be cooling off slightly. There is a risk of a thunderstorm, and then rain here and there throughout the weekend as well, dipping down to those low 20s up to mid 20s 20s as well. 19-20 for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 25-26, partly cloudy conditions. So it'll be a little bit cooler next week. Our average high for this time of year is 26 degrees. Our average low is 10. 36 degrees, like I mentioned, was the highest temperature recorded back on this day in 2001. 2 degrees was the lowest temperature back in 1969. Our sun rose at 6:25 this morning, expected to set at 8:45, so that puts us at just over 14 hours of daylight today. Conditions across the country for Friday, there is a weather statement to keep in mind for the Coquihalla Highway for Vancouver. That when we're talking about a weather statement, we're talking about strong winds and even a risk of a thunderstorm. So if you are traveling in those areas tomorrow, just kind of keep that in mind. Low or mid-20s expected for Victoria and for Vancouver. Cooling off to 15 degrees for Edmonton tomorrow, with rain dipping down to 17 for Calgary. They are also coming out of a heat warning as well. Looking to the rest of the prairies, mid-20s and up to those mid-30s for Saskatoon, Regina. There is lots of moisture as we're heading across the country. Risk of a thunderstorm in some areas. And then also some hazy conditions, humid temperatures for Winnipeg reaching 30 degrees with some cloud coverage for tomorrow. To the central part of the country, there is lots of moisture, like I mentioned. Risk of a thunderstorm in some areas as well. Ottawa, Toronto, and Montreal, those low 20s is kind of what's expected as they head into the weekend. And that rain will also continue heading into the weekend and into the rest of, into next week, That's kind of the same deal for Atlantic Canada as well. 22 for Fredericton, Halifax, 23 for Charlottetown, 21 for St. John's. That's for tomorrow, and that's kind of what's expected for the rest of the week and into next week, That's a look at your full weather forecast.
Flair Airlines is looking to speed up its pilot training with a new program. The Edmonton-based budget carrier says its program would see applicants placed in the cockpit of one of the company's Boeing 737 jets within 18 months. Pilots in Canada have historically had to spend many years flying small planes and regional routes before major carriers hire them to fly big jets. North America's aviation industry is facing a pilot shortage due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, an aging workforce, and the rapid increase of new discount airlines putting pressure on the labor supply. The Supreme Court of Canada has agreed to hear an appeal from several airlines looking to quash the federal government's passenger rights charter. The carriers argue that the 4-year-old rules violate global standards and should be rendered invalid for international flights. The companies launched in the suit in 2019, and it was mostly dismissed by the federal court of appeal in December. Under the federal rules, passengers have to be compensated up to $2,400 if they were denied boarding because a trip was overbooked, while delays and other payments for canceled flights warrant compensation of up to $1,000. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 86 points on the day to finish at 19,812. The Dow was down 290 points to 34,474. The S&P 500 was down 33 on the day to 4370, and the Nasdaq was down 157 points to finish at 13,316. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.01 to $80.39 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to $2.62 US. Gold was down $2.37 to $18.8943 US an ounce, and silver was even at $22.69 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.31 per bushel, barley is at $8.16, canola is at $18.16, and corn is at $9.75 per bushel. Live cattle were down 73 cents to $178.05. Feeder cattle were down $1.10 to $244.28. Lean hogs were up 98 cents to $79.15, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.86 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, thousands of Yellowknife residents have until noon tomorrow to get out as a wildfire approaches the capital of the Northwest Territories. Dozens of people from Yellowknife's homeless shelters are waiting to be sent to Calgary by plane. Thousands without access to a vehicle are waiting in line. Other communities near Yellowknife were evacuated earlier this week, including the hamlet of Enterprise, which has now been decimated due to the fires. Public policy impacts our lives in a variety of ways. Coming up, Hal Roberts chats with David Lease from the Frontier Center for Public Policy, who will discuss how the federal government's just transition policies will impact so many in our energy sector. If you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's stories, be sure to visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.